So here we are in Asia watching the events in Washington. China's wagging its finger at the United States, saying, do not default on your debt. Fair point. They're one of the biggest holders of U.S. treasuries in the world.
They are. I mean, as far as we can tell, we don't know exactly for sure, but we think they own something like $1.5 trillion worth of U.S. Treasury debt.
A fair chunk.
So a big chunk, the biggest chunk. And clearly that would make you nervous with the U.S. seeming pointing the gun at its foot and getting ready to pull the trigger. However, I think we need to sort of slightly pull this apart a bit, because even though there are dangers for China in a U.S. default, as there are for the rest of the world if that were to happen, there are also opportunities for China here to show itself as being a stronger and more responsible alternative, and also to push its own agenda, which is getting people to use the Chinese currency more. Now,
of course, in Asia as well, we're watching the Chinese leader Xi Jinping take the world stage with Obama not here for APEC. A real opportunity for China in terms of switching its holdings of U.S. treasuries if this debt default happens?
The geopolitics of it is that China can say, look, we have our own currency, the RMB, we have swap agreements with all these central banks around the world, we're encouraging people to use this for trade, to settle their trade in RMB. All of this will advance that agenda. At the same time, they've obviously been thinking about this for a while, because this is not the first time that the US has flirted with a debt ceiling. We had that back in 2009. We also had the US downgrade back in 2011. So clearly the rumblings have been there for the US.
And they must be systematically thinking about either A, how to reduce their holdings of US treasuries.
I'm sure they're thinking about that. I mean, the problem is it's not an easy thing to do. What do you buy instead? You've got $1.5 trillion of it. It's not an obvious decision, and it's not something you can do quickly. So let's be clear. If the US actually defaults on October the 17th or some point after that,
a week from now,
yeah, then we have at least we think we have a financial catastrophe on our hands, you know, that makes Lehman look like a bit of a sort of a walk in the park. And clearly that will affect everybody, and it will affect China as well, and it will affect the Chinese economy, trade, the financial system, and so forth. So it's not that China can't worry about that, but if we assume that the US won't actually go that far, but just acts to make itself look less responsible, slightly disorganized, and so forth, that actually could play, in the long term, could play into China's hands.
So it could be disastrous for everyone, including China, but yet another opportunity for China to shine in the long run.
Exactly.